Setting limits with a strong-willed child. Today's show will provide you with the guidance that you need to minimize misbehavior and to teach your child or your learner in the clearest and most understandable way your rules as a parent or as a teacher. My name's Michael Woods. I'm an autism and inclusion specialist for St. Louis's largest school district. I'm a board-certified associate behavior analyst. And I'm a father of triplet boys, all three boys on the autism spectrum. How do children learn rules? Well, here's a pretty good quote from developmentalist Jean Piaget. And his quote is, "The thinking and learning of children is qualitatively different than adults. Children think and learn concretely. For younger children, immediate experience plays a greater role in shaping their reality." So, what does this mean for parents or for teachers? So what does this mean? It means that children's beliefs are largely determined by what they experience. And this is the one thing that you need to take away from Piaget's discovery. The perceptions and beliefs about how your child thinks the world works is primarily based on his experiences. For adults, it's primarily based on what we hear and what we can rationalize and understand. Not for kids. It's mostly based on what they experience. For example, if I tell my son that it's not okay to practice swinging his bat in the house, but he does it anyway, and I overlook that, what is he really learning about my rule? Well, he's learning that it's really okay to swing the bat in the house regardless of what Dad says. However, if every time I take his bat away for the remainder of the day, each day that he swings it in the house, he's probably going to know that I mean what I say. Why? Because now he has a concrete experience of my rule. And if I'm consistent, he will learn that I mean what I say. So what does this mean to you? Well, basically, adults teach rules in two basic ways. We teach rules with our words, but we teach rules also with our actions. Now, both of those teach a lesson, but only your actions are concrete for your child. And so it's actions, not words, that define your rules for children. So when your actions and your words match consistently, strong-willed children who will test you will begin to learn through experience, that would be your action part, to take your words seriously and begin to recognize the rules behind them. How do strong-willed children do research? Well, let me ask you this. Does your child or your learner come up to you and say, "How much authority do you really have here?" Or perhaps they walk up to you and say, "How do I know if you really mean what you say?" Or perhaps you think kids walk up and say, "Well, what are you going to do if I don't do what you ask?" Now, this probably hasn't happened to a lot of you, so still the question remains, how do strong-willed kids do their research? Well, that's easy. They just go ahead and do whatever it was that you just asked them not to do. Most kids don't ask the questions that I just mentioned with their words, but if you think about it, they do ask those questions with their behaviors. And this is called limit testing behavior, and it's how your kids do their research. Testing your limits answers their questions more reliably than your words. Setting limits effectively. Setting limits effectively requires a balance of firmness and respect, and there's three components to doing this. And this approach can help you to achieve your goals with less time and less emotional energy on your part, and without injuring feelings or damaging relationships or provoking angry power struggles with your child or your learner in the process. And there's basically three good steps to setting limits effectively. 1. Give a clear message. 2. Provide limited but reasonable choices. And 3. Use instructive consequences that hold children accountable for their actions. Let's start by talking about giving a clear message. How do you use your words in the clearest and most understandable way? To deliver a clear message, you need to be direct and specific. A clear message informs children directly and specifically what you want them to do. It's not clean up your mess, but more directly and more specifically, you would say something like, you need to put the blocks back in the bucket. Be prepared to tell your child or your learner when you want something and how you want them to do it. And then a lot of times, the fewer the words you use, the better. Giving a clear message. Use a normal tone of voice when you give your message. You want to be specific and be direct, but also use a normal tone of voice. Your voice should communicate that you're firm and in control. It shouldn't communicate that you're anxious. It shouldn't communicate that you're stressed. It shouldn't communicate that you're angry. It should pretty much be a normal tone of voice, but firm. I work with a lot of strong-willed kids, and if they can sense or if they can hear from your tone of voice that you're anxious or that you're stressed, or from your facial expressions and or your voice that you're angry, then they know they're pushing your buttons, and that is like a green light to continue in with power struggles. So use a normal tone of voice. Another thing that you want to do to set limits effectively is to provide limited but reasonable choices. Using limited choices is a highly effective method for handling testing while teaching your child or your student responsibility. Here are some of the guidelines for using limited choices. You want to restrict the number of the choices that you present. In other words, limit the options to 2, maybe 3 at most. Remember that the fewer number of choices you present, the easier it's going to be for your child or your learner to make a choice. You give a strong-willed child 5 or 6 choices or options, they're going to press for more. Keep it down to 2, maybe 3 at the most. And remember that the younger the child, chronologically or developmentally, the less choices that they should be presented. And if your child or your learner attempts to introduce yet another choice that's not acceptable or beyond the scope of the choices that you provided, you should just simply respond, these are your choices and your only choices. Which one would you like to pick? Guidelines for using limited choices. Here's another one. State the consequences of your limits. By stating the consequences up front, you're providing your child or your learner with all of the information that they need to make a good choice. Failure to state a consequence for each choice that you provide is probably going to invite testing. So a lot of people say, you can sit by yourself, and that's all that they say. You want to state the consequences of what's going to happen so that your learner clearly understands, if I choose A, then B is going to happen. And if I choose C, then D is going to happen. Very important. They know the consequences up front, because then you know that they have all the information that they need to make an appropriate choice. Now, he or she may still not do that, but it won't be because they didn't know what was going to happen by choosing A or choosing C. And remember, for some kids, if you need a visual for this, I would recommend using a first then board. And I have another presentation on that. Instructive consequences. Consequences teach children to tune into your words. Why? Because a consequence involves action on your part. And remember, it's action that speaks louder than words, the more developmentally young a child or a learner is. No matter how clear your message is, children still may decide to test. And when they do, it's time to act. Talking is done. Don't negotiate. Don't bargain. Don't repeat yourself for the fourth or fifth time. Don't provide the seventh or eighth reminder. The talking is done. It's time to act and to follow through on the consequences that you stated for each course of action or each choice that you provided. You need to answer their research question with a concrete action, because actions speak louder than words. Seeking professional help. If your child or student engages in extreme behavior, such as assaultive behavior, it is not something that you should undertake without a plan. You need to develop, with the help of a trained professional, a set of crisis response procedures that are designed to look out for the care, the welfare, and the safety of everyone, the child and the adults involved, if this becomes a crisis situation. And if this is an area of concern for you, please seek out professional assistance from a local county agency or a local school district. Now, for a more detailed presentation on this topic, go to my website, www.makingroom.net. That's www.makingroom, one word, .net. Go to the download section and the radio show section, and you'll find a much more detailed presentation on this topic.